Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Once the countdown finished, a monster started to assemble in the middle of the room. Since the first boss is just a simple damage check, I can probably relax a little. Shiro thought to herself. Isaac had already stood back up as he readied his sword. As much as he wanted to relish in the feeling of pain, he knew that this was no time to joke around despite it being a test. Yura. An ear-rupturing roar rang out as the hulking beast stood in front of the party. From what Shiro could see, the monster looked like a wingless wyvern that crawled on all fours. First test, damage check. Please focus on damaging the boss as much as you can. Hearing the announcement, the party nodded their head and dashed forwards. Shiro tapped her necklace and summoned out ataraxia. Just a walk in the park on a nice day. She thought to herself. Holding the handle of her sword, she walked towards the boss at a steady pace. The people that were overviewing the entire area frowned seeing her nonchalant attitude. Young master, are you sure that you want her on the party? Wouldn't her attitude leave the party in jeopardy? One of them asked in concern. Don't worry about it. From what I know, she's the serious type when the stakes are high. Right now, as there is no risk, she is probably wanting to take things easy. Out of all the party members, I guess her party of 3 are the ones that we need to worry the least about. However, if you want to talk about those who might put the party in jeopardy, I suggest you keep an eye on Lox. He's not the most cooperative type, Kier said while narrowing his eyes on Lox. Even now, he was having an argument with Alara while keeping an eye on Ian, Lysandra, and Shiro. He couldn't lay a hand on Alara because of Kier, but Shiro's party wasn't the same. I'm free to do what I want when the raid's finished. Who knows? Maybe I'll have a chance inside the raid. He thought with a cruel smile. Meanwhile, several skills collided with the boss's body and reduced its armor count rapidly. Bang 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 bang. Waving its arms around, it locked several skills and charged towards those it deemed to look the weakest. Locking its gaze onto Shiro, the boss growled and punched towards her. Oh, so you think I'm weak now, do you? Shiro raised an eyebrow. Smiling lightly, she swung her sword and collided it with the claw. Clang. Sliding back a few steps, she managed to stop the fist by redirecting the force into the ground. Swinging her body onto the fist, she dashed along its arm while making deep lacerations with every step she took. Yura. Crying out in rage, the boss tried to get Shiro off its arm. Unfortunately for it, Shiro had already reached its head. Twisting her body, she kicked the monster on the temple and forced it to fall on its side. Flicking her sword into the air, she summoned her other swords and had all of them attack the boss. While the others were watching, they weren't idle either and started to bombard the boss's colossal body. See? Kier smiled lightly when he saw the observer's shocked face. Nodding his head slowly, the observer looked at the statistics and noticed that she had been eerily calm the entire time. Her heartbeat didn't even fluctuate at the sight of the boss, which should be impossible in his eyes. No matter what, fear was always a part of the human conscious. Even if she was confident in taking down the boss, her heartbeat should have at least fluctuated slightly. Impossible, he muttered. However, what he didn't know was that there were not many things that Shiro was afraid of in her life. She had experienced death and the feeling of being close to death for many years. She faced off against the strongest monsters and came out victorious. She was surrounded by hundreds of Tier 5 powerhouses and fought for several days, and yet she never feared any of them. She even killed her best friend, despite the fact that it wasn't her fault and had never wanted such an outcome. Having experienced all that she could have in her first life, her mental strength was much stronger than what people could comprehend. A mere simulation could never shake her up. If it did, she might as well forget about all that she had done in her first life. As the boss's HP slowly dropped, Shiro had decided to rest on her sword. Laying her body on a copy of Ataraxia, she had it fly around so that she wouldn't get hit. Of course, she still instructed the other swords to attack so the party members couldn't complain, especially when Shiro was in the upper portion of the damage per second chart. While each of her attacks were slightly inferior in terms of damage, she compensated with the sheer volume of attacks that she could output. Once the boss was dead, she managed to rank 5th out of everyone. As for Ian and Lysandra, they ranked 4th and 6th. As for the one who did the most damage, it was naturally Isaac. Miss Nitri, how was I? He asked while trying to get her attention. Don't know, don't care. Shiro clicked her tongue while glaring at him in disdain. Ah, that glare. Isaac smiled happily. Flinching in disgust, Shiro used Phantom Path and flickered next to Lysandra and Ian. Ahem. Please get ready for the next boss. The observer reminded them as Isaac sighed and readied himself. There was plenty of chances to fawn over Shiro later. The second boss was mainly cannon fodder, so it was a walk in the park for Shiro once more. A single wave of her hand will kill the mobs in one slice. Even when she reduced her strength so that it matched a slightly more powerful level 51, she demonstrated how technique could overcome levels since each of her attacks were lethal and precise. It made them wonder if she was an old monster, as what she was doing could only be a result of experience, and experience comes with time. Asterisk sigh. Sighing out slightly, Shiro stretched her body. You seem relaxed, Mom, Ian said as she walked over. Well, what do you expect? Everything is easy. Shiro shrugged since this posed no difficulty on her. I guess you're right. The last two bosses were a bit simple, weren't they? Ian nodded. Probably because they're mostly focused on getting us used to the mechanics. I can almost guarantee that on the fourth boss, they'll crank up the difficulty to catch us off guard. That way, they can see how we react if anything were to happen suddenly. After all, you don't know what might happen in the raid. Shiro smiled as she looked up at where the camera should be. Seeing Shiro make eye contact with them, Kira raised an eyebrow. She's quite sensitive, isn't she? Kira asked with a smile. Indeed. Even though it's just a virtual world, her senses allow her to notice when someone is looking at her. Young master, who is she? There is no way that someone like her could be found on the streets. Her parameters are off the charts. Reaction speed, technique, body control, and even mana control. Each of them are amazing. The observer asked with a frown. Just looking at her current performance and analysis through the system made his head hurt. He couldn't fathom how someone could be this in tune with their body. Her brain activity was incredible as well. When one moves their body, most of it will just be subconscious maneuver. But she was different. From what he could see, she was consciously controlling every muscle. The amount of brain power and talent needed to do this was simply unheard of. This was because a normal person could only focus on a limited amount of things before it becomes mediocre. However, Shiro was different. She was like a supercomputer processing everything on super speed. Hell, he wouldn't be surprised if she did have a computer in her mind, because if a normal adventurer tried the same, it'd be akin to having a pedal bike travel to space on its own. Unless it was heavily modified, the person wouldn't even be able to take a step before he loses his balance from forgetting to control his center of gravity or his other foot. Such a monstrous being should be part of a big family in the front lines. She shouldn't be in what they would call the countryside. I don't know. Perhaps we can find out if we do a web-wide search of her? Scan her face, voice, and fighting patterns. See if you can find a link. Kira suggested. Understood. Meanwhile, Shiro noticed some strange movements and quickly disconnected herself without anyone noticing. It would just look like she was resting for a moment. Once she disconnected, she noticed that they were trying to scan her. Not today. Shiro smiled and uploaded the wrong data. They weren't about to find out her true identity just yet. After all, if they knew that she pierced asses too soon, it wouldn't be any fun now, would it? Returning back to the simulation, Shiro saw that she was just in time for the boss to load up. You alright, Mum? Ian furrowed her brows. She had tried to call for Shiro, but she didn't respond. Yeah, don't worry. I was just thinking about something. Shiro smiled. For this boss, it's not going to be a boss, but rather a shooting test. Each of you will face a shooting board, and we will be testing you on how many targets you can destroy and how accurate you are. The observer explained as a shooting range appeared in front of them. Hundreds of targets were floating in the air as some would move around unpredictably. Since they were floating in the air, one would need to either jump up or fly for them to hit the targets at melee range. We'll have each of you stand up to the platform and attack the targets. You can either melee them if you want or attack them with magic. As long as you're able to destroy the targets, the test will proceed. Once he finished saying what he needed to say, the observer teleported Isaac onto the platform since he was ranked 1 for the previous 2 tests and had the highest points. Swinging his sword a few times, Isaac nodded his head and calmed his mind. His breathing became stable as his eyes focused on the targets. When he's not being a pervert, He's quite admirable. Shiro thought in praise. The act of getting himself into the right mindset earned several praise points from Shiro, but was immediately deduced because he was Isaac. A timer appeared above him as it counted down from 3. Once it reached 1, several targets lit up with a red glow as Isaac pierced out with his sword. The blade of his sword flickered with several reflections, as if a mirror had just been shattered on the blade, and shot out a blade of energy towards the targets. Asterisk, bang, 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 bang. Half of the targets were pieces instantly, as there was a clean hole through the center. A long-range skill, huh? Unfortunately, seems like it's still a bit limited since he couldn't stab all of them. Shiro analyzed. Stabbing out once more, Isaac was able to pierce the second half with relative ease. Round 1 pass. Taking a deep breath, Isaac readied himself once more as the second round was able to begin. All of the rounds up to round 5 were just normal target practice. However, the time he had to pierce the targets slowly decreased as he progressed. By the time he reached round 4, he was missing a few targets due to the distance and the lack of time to pierce them. At round 6, targets started to move around as Isaac had to try to predict their movements. This limited the amount of attacks he could output since he had to focus on multiple things. He could activate his sword domain, but the range of his domain couldn't reach the targets. TCH. Clicking his tongue, he tried his best but started to miss more and more. Barely passing round 6, he wasn't able to complete round 7 since the targets were simply too hard to hit. Not only were the time allowed to try hit them small, but he needed to register all of their locations as well as predict their movements. And this wasn't accommodating for time needed for the energy to hit the targets either. Asterisk sigh. Unlucky, I suppose. He smiled slightly and was teleported off the platform. Don't worry, young Master Isaac. This test is primarily aimed for mages. For you to be able to reach round 7 with a decent amount of accuracy and speed is commendable. Alara praised. Thank you. Isaac nodded and accepted her praise despite being frustrated at himself. I need to obtain a few more long-range skills in case of any unfavorable situations in the future, he thought to himself. Looking at Isaac's score, Shiro understood that he did relatively well. Unlike mages, he couldn't change his attack's flight path mid-travel, so he had to analyze the situation better. Once the moving targets came into play, he had basically lost. Ignoring Isaac for now, Shiro turned her attention to Alara since she was ranked 2nd. As a mage that focused on firepower, her defense and speed were subpar, so this kind of test was perfect for her. Flicking her arm out, several orbs of fire revolved around her. Go, she commanded as they shot towards the targets. Analyzing her spell, Shiro noticed that it seemed to be a mark and locate type spell. Alara would mark a target down, and the orbs would locate the said target, destroying it in the process. While her analytical abilities were lower than Isaac's, her skill made up for the gap. Unfortunately for her, the orbs didn't care about what was in the way, so while she couldn't miss, she had to be careful of hitting the wrong targets. But despite this problem, she was still able to reach round 9. Since her rank was 5, there were 2 others in front of her before it was her turn. Ian was rank 4, so it was her turn soon. The next person in line was able to reach round 8, but had hit too many wrong targets, so his overall score was similar to Isaac's. Fufu, it's finally this baby's turn. Ian grinned as she stepped forwards. Good luck. Both Shiro and Lysandra encouraged. Teleporting on the platform, Ian cracked her knuckles and created several Dark Star spears. I can't be exactly like Mom, but I can try. She smiled. Once the timer hit 0, she sent the spears shooting towards the targets. Smirking slightly, she clutched her fist and split the spears into several pieces which stabbed different targets. Shiro was speechless at her attempt. She just hit everything she could see. She cried out in her mind. That's right. Ian didn't even bother looking at which one was one, as she just sent a spear at all of them. Why are you acting like that when you can't even hit them accurately? Shiro facepalmed as she looked away. Ian only reached round 3. So what do you think? Ian asked with a bright smile. Ignoring your accuracy, the spell was good. The mana distribution is acceptable and each spear was almost identical. Good job. Shiro forced a smile as she learned from her past actions. Hee then treat me to a buffet next time. Ian grinned. Oi, don't take it too far. Since Ian had finished her attempt, it was naturally Shiro's turn. Teleporting up to the platform, she summoned all 7 copies of Ataraxia and smiled confidently. Unlike my foolish daughter, I don't speak nonsense. She chuckled softly. Waving her fingers, she activated the light element shift. Looking at the golden glow that radiated off of the sword, Shiro gripped her hand. In my life, not only did you betray me, but you also killed me. However, as your enemy, I have to admit that your control over the light element was by far the best. You shall become my stepping stone to tier 8. She thought as she concentrated the aura around her sword. Pinching her fingers, a small spark of electricity and light started to fuse together while 3 swords rotated around them. 3, 2, 1, 0. Snapping her fingers, the spark exploded as a ray of light was redirected to all of the glowing targets. Before anyone realized, the swords had already traveled along the light path and returned to her side. Round 1 passed. What? The observer cried out in shock as he slammed his palm onto the console. Ridiculous. How could she do that? He shouted while constantly replaying that moment. Once the timer hit 0, she had loaded her swords and fired them off like a gun. Similar to what Isaac does when he saves a stance, her sword then retraced the flight path and reappeared beside her. However, unlike Isaac, her attack was almost instantaneous and the accuracy was incredible. All of the swords hit the center without missing at all. It was almost as if she had copied and pasted the wound on the targets since they were the same. Unbelievable, Kier muttered while looking at the scene. He could tell that in the short moment she fired her swords, there was so much more going on. While he couldn't see the minute details, he could tell that it wasn't an easy feat to pull off. Looking down at his hands, he wondered if he could do the same should he be given the same tools as her. But the only answer he thought of to that was impossible. Who is she? He narrowed his eyes. He won. No, he needed to find out. Once the test ended, everyone looked at Shiro like she was an absolute monster. That was because she had finished the entire test with a perfect score and 100% accuracy. By the time it was on the 10th round, some of them could barely recognize the targets before they disappeared. Walking back to the duo, Shiro patted Lysandra's shoulder and smiled. Good luck. Nodding her head, Lysandra wondered why Shiro was much better at using the light element despite only getting it recently. Could it be because she copied off of the hero? Even then, you can't just perform to this extent just by watching. Lysandra mused to herself, but soon snapped out of it, since it was her turn on the test. Pulling out her sword, she looked down on her hand as she closed her eyes. Remembering what Shiro had done, she wondered if she could do the same. No, I can't. Mom is in another league altogether. But that does not mean I can't take her movements as inspiration. For me, there's a limit to my control and how many targets I can recognize in an instant. She shook her head with a smile. But just because I don't have the power to hit all the targets at once, doesn't mean I can't plan out my route of attack. She muttered with a smile. Looking up into the air, she saw the location of each target and planned a route in her mind. Crouching down, she readied her sword. Is she going to jump to the targets? Perhaps. From what we know, she's a melee fighter, isn't she? Smiling at the sounds of discussion around them, Shiro narrowed her eyes at Lysandra. I've taught you how to control your body in midair. I taught you how to reinforce your body, and I've also taught you about how you can control magic. Now what will you do with this knowledge? Shiro thought with a soft smile. The moment the timer hit 0, Lysandra launched herself at the first target. Twisting her body, she slashed it in half with relative ease. But now was the hard part. Since she was in the air, there were hardly any way she could move around unless she landed once more. She couldn't summon a sword and step on it, either due to 2 reasons. Number 1 was that it wasn't controlled using magic. Without this, the sword will just fall, and number 2 is no resistance. If she steps on the falling sword, the only thing that it'll accomplish would be making the sword fall faster. Smiling lightly, she summoned a sword despite the problems regarding this. Oh, interesting. Shiro smiled as she realized what Lysandra wanted to do. Tracing her finger along the sword, a row of runes appeared before she slammed her palm into the pommel and sent it flying towards the next target, leaving a trail of light behind it. Nigerian Irioi Bass. Just before the sword hit the target, Lysandra's body appeared above the sword, slashing the target in 2. What? She never hit the ground. How did she appear at the target? While they were discussing several plausible theories, Shiro already understood what had happened. When she drew the runes down, she set up a path of light in which her movement speed increased. Once the sword was about to hit the target, she exploded a small pocket of mana under her feet, much like what I did against Isaac, stacking the speed gained from the explosion and the path of light to reach her destination. As the flight path was a simple straight line, she didn't need to worry about any deviations apart from making sure that she could stop herself from going further. Shiro analyzed with a smile. "You should learn from your sister rather than eat all day," she said whilst turning to Ian. "Oomph, she's a physical-based class, and this baby's magic-based. Range isn't a problem." Ian pouted. "TCH, but what if she managed to get close to you? If you tried to use your spells up close, there's a chance for you to harm yourself in the process." Shiro rolled her eyes and flicked Ian on the forehead. "Ow. Oomph, I call biased." Ian rubbed her forehead. "Biased my ass. Do I need to buy a family's worth of steak meals for her in one go?" Shiro retorted. "URG." Ignoring the stupid bird, Shiro turned her attention back to Lysandra. Following her technique, she was able to hit all of the targets that didn't move. Unfortunately, much like Isaac, she struggled on the targets that did move. In the end, she was able to reach round 6, but had failed to reach round 7. "Good job," Shiro praised, since she was able to improve her body and mana control by a decent margin. "Thanks." Lysandra nodded as she had a smile behind her mask. After the rest of the members took the test, they were given a few minutes to rest while they looked through the results. "Miss Nitri, if we were to give you both the roles of fodder clear and target shooting, will you be able to handle it?" The observer asked, as Shiro was the most suited to destroy the targets. However, to do so, one would need to kill the cannon fodders that appear in the raid. "Nope. I'll have to be paired up with someone, since it's impossible even for me to handle so many things at once." Shiro replied with a smile. Of course, she's lying, but she didn't want to think about the MP cost of needing to kill all of the mobs along with the targets. Not to mention, she still needed to help with damaging the boss too. We'll pair you up with someone else so that you two will be responsible for both fodder and targets. Is that okay?" "Well, it's better than being on my own." Shiro shrugged. From her viewpoint, it was understandable that they wanted to have more people focus on dealing with the boss. However, she knew that Kier wanted to know more about her capabilities and identity. Therefore, she'll work with someone else for now. When the break was over, they brought out the fourth boss. However, since everyone understood what to do, there weren't too many problems. However, where things went wrong was when they accidentally killed a fodder. Or rather, a group of fodder due to their skills. This made it so that Shiro and her partner couldn't hit enough targets since the buff was needed. Blame was thrown around as the party was thrown into disarray. Sigh. Rubbing her head, Shiro looked at the party that was fighting amongst itself and couldn't help but wonder if this will be fine. For this raid, as long as the mechanics don't need more than 3 people, I can probably do it with Ian and Lysandra. Of course, we'll need to be going at full power, or else our damage simply wouldn't match up. Shiro mused to herself. Right now, if she was to go full power with her Snowmancer class, not including power-up items or berserk, she estimated that she could match 3 or 4 of these so-called geniuses in terms of firepower. But she wouldn't be able to sustain herself for a long period should she do that. But if she was to stay in this party, they'll have to work around their personal grudges first, or else the risk would simply be too high for her to bother. Honestly, if it wasn't for this task, I wouldn't even be here. Nantion better give me 2 rebirth pills for this. Shiro frowned. Maybe I can coerce Chinyu to give me more. Unlike Nantion, he's fun to play around with. Shiro giggled slightly when thinking of the things he can put him through. Perhaps she could give him a little prod so that he's more obedient. "What are you smiling about, Mom?" Ian asked curiously. "Nothing much. Just wondering if I should pierce someone that I know." Shiro replied with a wave of her hand. Who?" Ian raised an eyebrow. She didn't know who was unlucky enough to find him slash herself at the receiving end of Shiro's spear. "Someone you don't know yet." Shiro chuckled softly. ####. For the next few days, the party practiced on fighting the 4th boss along with improving their teamwork. As for Shiro, she balanced her day with going to the mana springs and practice. Ever since she formed a connection to Nimue, she noticed that both her body and mana started to get stronger every day without her even needing to raise a hand. After asking Nimue, it turns out that since she was a monster, her physical body was naturally a little different. With the increase in mana purity, her body was bound to experience some benefits. Of course, Shiro also noticed the increase in mana, but set it aside for now. The most likely reason would probably be because Nimue was going to be leaving with her soon. She'll naturally take all of her mana with her. Soon, the day of the proper raid had arrived. All of the party members stood outside the raid door as they adjusted their armor. "Let's go," Isaac called out as he was chosen to be the captain for the first raid. "Let's go." Following behind Isaac, the party marched into the raid door as the spectators cheered. Glancing at the pillars that she had inspected the last time that she was here, Shiro noticed the clear signs of deterioration. If I'm not wrong, the raid door will be broken in a minimum of 2 days. If we're lucky, it'll take more than 4 days. She thought while narrowing her eyes. "Is there a problem, Mum?" Ian whispered over. "Yeah, seems like the raid door will only last around 2 more days. After that, there's a high chance that the monsters inside will be free to escape." Shiro replied seriously. "So we only have 2 days to try to get the first clear?" Lysandra asked. During the time that they would be idle in their room, Shiro explained to her the benefits to an emergency raid like this and how the first clear will give them a unique item that wouldn't appear again. "Yeah." Shiro nodded her head. "Do you think that we can do it by ourselves? If we get the item in front of this many people, wouldn't we be targeted? No matter how strong we are, fighting and killing this many young masters and mistresses will only invite trouble." Lysandra whispered. "It depends. We'll see how it goes in the raid. We've already seen how each of the families have a grudge against one another. They won't drop this no matter what, even if it's for the raid. The moment a good item appears, a mini war will break out. If not now, later when the raid is cleared. Kairosa will be filled with fighting much like what happened during the slums fight." Shiro replied. "I see." Lysandra nodded. However, she didn't know that Shiro had something else in mind. The first clear rewards are simply too precious to give up, and Shiro knows that whoever lands the last hit on the boss will get it. During that time, if she was to substitute it with something that she made and give it to someone else, she'll not only divert the attention to said person, but also keep the rewards. Naturally, she had a safety net known as fake identity. During this time, no one had found out about their true identities. Therefore, she could just get rid of this identity and go on with her life as usual. By the time they found her, she should be powerful enough to hold her own. In addition to this, she's made sure that her identity was different from her real identity since she hadn't used any of the skills that she's known for yet. But once she does, a connection will be formed, and that's not what she wanted. As she stepped into the raid door, a blinding light covered her vision, forcing her to shield her eyes. Soon, sounds of rustling and birds chirping could be heard. Opening her eyes, Shiro saw that they were in a jungle. The plant life and such were much different than the one she had seen online. The jungle of a different world, Shiro thought to herself. "Everyone, Formation 2. We'll have Miss Nitri and the other lower levels kill the monsters for now so that they can level up," Isaac commanded. "Understood." With Shiro, Lysandra, Ian, and another member of the Holland family leading the way, the party proceeded through the forest according to the map that the cartographers had created in the Osbar mansion. Rustle. Hearing a rustle amongst the bushes, the party instantly went on guard even though they were confident in killing monsters. Being caught off guard will still lead to death. This was no simulation. However, Shiro only scoffed slightly and pinched her fingers together. Dark star and light element concentrated into a needle as she threw it above them. Bang. Widening their eyes in shock, they saw a monster with a clean hole burned through its skull. Third-rate assassin. Shiro scoffed and proceeded to walk. Looking at each other in disbelief, the party eventually nodded their heads and followed behind her. "Mum likes to show off a little, huh?" Ian giggled. "Yes, she does. But sometimes she doesn't mean to since they are indeed too weak in front of her." Lysandra smiled. ####. Meanwhile, deep in the jungle, a shadowed figure raised its head into the air a few times and sniffed. TCH, new intruders. This seemed to be quite powerful too. It narrowed its eyes. Looking down on the ground, it clicked its tongue at the female corpses that lay on the ground. "No fun when they're cold. F***CK. Why did I get this monster body? It doesn't feel as good as before." He growled and stuffed all of the corpses into its mouth. Hopefully I can get some new playmate hee. Just as it finished saying this, it disappeared from its spot like a ghost. The only thing that remained was torn clothes, blood, and other bodily fluids. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. Making their way through the forest, none of the monsters were able to land a single hit on the party. Some were able to use the Holland family member as a cover, but was easily dealt with by Lysandra. In the end, it was only Shiro, Een, and Lysandra leading the party. During this time, Shiro had managed to level up to 52, meaning that Lysandra was the same. As for Een, her level didn't increase at all. This had pushed Shiro's mana over the 2 million threshold. We should be arriving at the first boss soon, Isaac warned. Treading through the overgrown foliage, they soon saw a giant armored lizard lathed on the side of a cliff. Ancient Armored Lizard, LVL 60 Boss. HP 30,000 000/30 000 MP 20 000/20 000 Guys, be careful. While his HP and MP is low for a level 60 boss, his armor stat is off the chart. You attacks that might have done hundreds of thousands to the boss before will only do tens of thousands. Isaac frowned. Formation 5. We'll take care of him as quick as possible. Shifting their formation once more, the tankers charged forwards using all of their defense boost skills onto the main tanker. He immediately took the aggro and slammed the giant lizard against the cliff wall. Asterisk, bang. Cracks spread out as the cliff started to collapse. Oh my, seeing his strength after all the buffs in real life is indeed different from the simulations. Alara muttered as the party members couldn't help but nod. Stop being in awe and let's kill it. Isaac reprimanded while a silver aura enveloped his body. Nodding their heads, they all readied their skills. Just as Shiro was about to attack, she noticed a stare sweep past her. That's the intelligent monster. I should keep some of my skills hidden for now and weaken my physical abilities too. Shiro thought to herself and made a lightning sword instead. Making eye contact with both Een and Lysandra, Shiro made a small hand gesture which meant suppress. It was something that they had discussed in their spare time. Sometimes they can't talk or else their plan will be exposed, so Shiro made up gestures for suppress, all out, control, and so on. Both Een and Lysandra nodded their heads and restrained their power output. Since the first boss had already been killed once, they were in no hurry to kill it. Time passed as the monster's health decreased. It was a relatively simple raid since all they needed to do was make sure the tanker was alive. Nothing too strenuous for the healers on the team. However, during this entire time, Shiro had noticed the intelligent monster carefully inspecting their movements. His gaze had landed on her a few times, and it reminded her of the eyes of someone who was inspecting each dish. Slave owners. Shiro thought to herself. That gaze belonged to one that had owned and bought many slaves in his lifetime. She remembered seeing this type of gaze during one of their missions in the hero party. She and her friends acted like merchandise, while the other party members were the traders. Their goal at that time was to find out where they had kept all their shipment, and the end of the mission was naturally the torture of those who laid a hand on the woman. Seems like this monster came from another world similar to me, or else the gaze would not be so experienced. TCH, trash. She thought while clicking her tongue. Throughout the boss fight, she had accidentally flung 2 attacks at the monster and noticed that it was extremely swift. A speed-type monster that was experienced like her. A troublesome opponent. After killing the first boss, the party took this time to recuperate their stamina. Setting up a temporary camp, they had people stand guard while the main tanker rested for a moment. Shiro took this time to go around killing the wandering monsters while Een and Lysandra followed her. Did you find out anything? Shiro asked as she had tasked them with finding anything that could potentially lead them to the intelligent monster. No, there was nothing, not even a footprint. Lysandra shook her head. That's rather troublesome. I suppose that's to be expected since the monster is extremely fast. Shiro frowned. Shall we warn them? Een asked. No, not yet. If they cause a commotion, it'll make the monster wary of our movements. Right now, we're using the excuse of hunting to leave the camp so the monster wouldn't find anything strange about this. But if we tell the entire party, the monster will hear them talking about its existence, and that's something we can't have. Otherwise, we won't be able to take it off guard with our attacks, lowering our chance of killing it. Shiro shook her head. Anyways, let's go back to the camp. We've killed all the monsters around for now, so it's time for the next boss. Once they returned to the camp, they started to make their way to where the second boss was. From their information, the boss was a giant tree that would spawn tiny copies of itself, and one had to destroy the copies before focusing on the tree. Normally, trying to find a specific tree in a forest would be hard, but due to the size and the arena, it was easily spotted. Even from a long distance away, they could see the towering tree that stood above the forest. Seriously, even though we knew its height, this is a bit ridiculous, isn't it? How does a tree even get this big? Wouldn't the nutrients it requires drain the forest entirely? One of the party members raised an eyebrow. Don't question it. We launch magical fires with a wave of our fingers and even destroy cliffs. Why is a massive F***CK off tree confusing you? One of the tankers laughed. Well, I suppose. But aren't you curious as well? A little. Monsters are formed from mana. They don't need any nutrients to speak of when they form. The tree could have been spawned like this. One of the mages answered. Shiro nodded to this explanation as well, since only mana was needed when a monster first forms. Of course, some other mediums are desired, an example being a corpse for snow girls, but they weren't mandatory. It only increases the chance of a specific monster being born. For example, in a place filled with lava, fire-based monsters are more likely to spawn due to the environment. But that didn't mean an ice-type monster couldn't be born. Only that when they are born, they'll die rather quickly due to the environment and the hostile monsters around it. Upon arriving at the arena, the boss instantly reacted and summoned his minions. Soon, the arena was filled with what seemed to be a turtle made from wood. World Eater Trance Sapling, LVL 60 Boss. HP 60 000 000 /60 000 000. MP 67 500 000/70 000 World Eater Guards, LVL 55 Elite. HP 5 000 000/5 000 000. MP 3 000 000/3 000 000. Formation 1. Healers heal those who are low and supports buff Miss Nitri's group of 3. Isaac commanded while dashing towards the closest group of guards. Shiro wasn't too far behind him either, as she felt her strength increase. Since I'm being buffed, it should be okay to show more of my power, or else it'll be weird. She thought to herself. Flicking Ataraxia into the sky, she summoned out the other copies and had them scatter throughout the arena. Try not to make contact with the monster, K. Shiro called out nonchalantly as the party instantly pulled back. Knowing her destructive power from the tests, despite her holding back, they knew that they'll be injured heavily if they didn't listen. Asterisk, boom. 2 Tier 3 magic circles appeared in the sky as Shiro grinned. Using a mixture of her lightning and metal attunement, she summoned down pillars of lightning onto her swords. Tier 3 lightning magic, lightning web. Asterisk TZZZ. Lightning traveled through all of the monsters as scorch marks could be seen all over their bodies. Their defense should now be weakened and their reactions will be dull. Shiro informed as she retrieved her swords. Bending her knees slightly, she grabbed 2 of her swords and dashed forwards. Twisting her body, she slashed all of the monsters that she ran past. Kill them all. Isaac shouted out as worship could be seen in his eyes. In jumped into the air and pushed her palms forward. Creating a Tier 3 magic circle, she made 2 more and threw them towards the monsters. Expand. Clutching her hands into a first, she expanded the magic circles and activated them. Asterisk boom. Several whips made from dark star energy erupted from the circles and lashed out at all the monsters within its range. As for Lysandra, she followed behind Shiro and killed monsters with her sword skills. While the party fought the minions, the boss would either stab towards them with tree trunks or use leaves to block their vision. But with the existence of talented tankers and archers, they didn't need to worry too much about these things. Watching the party coordinate with each other, the monster narrowed its eyes dangerously. That commander with the silver aura seems to be the most dangerous out of them. The girl named Alara and the tanker seems to be problematic too, he thought while analyzing their fighting style. However, while he could tell that those three were dangerous, he was more concerned about Shiro's group. While her display so far is not bad, even after receiving the buff, she shouldn't be giving me a sense of death. Some sword sage shouldn't be a danger to me since they can't harm what they can't hit. The fire mage in her group is just a kid, and the other girl can only use a sword as well. Logically, these three should pose no threat to me. And why does the name Nitri ring a bell? He frowned in concern. As an assassin in his past life, he knew that he should trust his instincts. But he simply couldn't tell why he should be wary of the three girls. Now that he had the monster title that doubles his stats, he was a monstrous entity amongst the mid-levels of C-class despite only being at the early levels. That was the benefits that were brought by the monster title, a privilege he couldn't experience in his old life. TCH, if I had this when I fought that B** starred, he wouldn't even be able to hit me. He clicked his tongue at the thought of why he died. Shaking his head of the thoughts, he flickered to another spot around the area. Staying in one place was never good. Meanwhile, Shiro narrowed her eyes slightly when she felt the source of the gaze disappear. So he's changed spots again. She thought to herself. From what she had felt a moment before his disappearance, he had cultivated quite a large amount of killing intent. While it couldn't compare to hers, it was definitely larger than average. The more she felt his gaze, the more serious Shiro's facial expression became. That was because she could feel suspicion and wariness in his gaze whenever he looked at her. Despite having held back on my power output, he's still suspicious. This might mean that his instincts are sensitive. A seasoned adventurer. Furrowing her brows, she cut down another monster as she wondered if she should restrain herself more. But that was quickly forgotten since it would only be more suspicious if she didn't use any skills. I'll see what happens for now. But since it's an intelligent and seasoned monster, we'll probably only get one chance since he'll be on guard after seeing the return stones. Depending on the situation, he'll probably attack on the fourth boss since no one had cleared that yet. It'll be risky to fight him at that moment without being able to access my full power. She couldn't stay behind after they left using the return stones either since that'll mean that she had to fight against the boss and the monster at the same time. That would simply be too dangerous even for her. Seems like I'll have to try to distract the party or make it so that the monster can't interfere with the boss fight. She narrowed her eyes. Crack. Ripping her sword out of the Trent's body, Shiro watched as the second boss crumbled away. Good work, guys. Isaac smiled as he called out for everyone's attention. The third boss is, as you know, mainly target shooting, so we'll go with Formation 6 where Miss Nitri is our focus. Do everything we can to make her job easy since almost all of the pressure is on her. He turned towards Shiro and gave her a smile. However, Shiro only glanced at him for a moment before checking her loot. There were weapons and armor, some at the purple rank, but they were mostly items for recycling since she had better equipment. Naturally, she had found a set item that caught her interest. World Eater Trant Gauntlet LVL 60 purple, 1/4. Plus 1,200 dex. Plus 500 int. Plus 500 def. Skill Root. Root. Summon roots that will restrain your enemies for 5 seconds. Maybe shorter or longer depending on the difference in levels. Number of enemies that can be affected is 3. Cost. Not applicable. Cooldown. 30 seconds. World Eater set effect. 2/4. Plus 2,000 vit. Plus 1,000 def. Skill. Guardian Summon. Guardian Summon. Summon a guardian whose level is equal to yours. It will protect you no matter the cost. Number of guardians is equal to class tier. Tier 1 is equal to 1 guardian. Tier 2 is equal to 2 guardian, etc. Cost. Not applicable. Duration. 1 minute. Cooldown. 10 minutes. While the stats were a little low for a piece of level 60 equipment, the skills made up for this deficit. This was especially so for the root skill. In Shiro's opinions, she valued the root skill over the guardians since there was a lot one could do in the 5 seconds that the enemy is immobile. And since the description showed that you can target 3 enemies, she could at least kill one of them in that time. This item will help a lot in situations when I'm outnumbered and they're stronger than me. If I do need to fight against human adventurers, I can use this to root the tankers and attackers while I kill the supports. She thought to herself. Unfortunately, by the time she reached level 60, She had her Kaiser Dragon set armor, so this would be left in her inventory to rot. She couldn't recycle this for the skill either since she couldn't get skills from set armors. Otherwise, she would have long recycled the set skill from the Spider Raid set armor that Helion had created. That was because the set skill was called Empowered Rampage. The effect of said skill was 20% attack speed and 20% power for 1 minute, and the cooldown was 5 minutes. As for the backlash, it was just a measly minus 40 points to every stat for 2 minutes. Such a backlash was nothing compared to the stats she had now. Even her lowest stat, the defense stat, was at 4,000 after her level up. As for her highest stat, intelligence, it was at an astounding 16k points. That was just the base points as well. This didn't include the title bonus, which would propel it past the 20k mark. A number that was insane for any level 52 to have in a single stat if they didn't have a class like hers. Did you get anything good, Miss Nitri? Isaac took the initiative to ask her. Amen? Somewhat. I managed to get a gauntlet piece for the said item, Shiro said as she showed the armor. She wasn't too bothered about them knowing since it wasn't useful to her at all. Would you like to sell it to one of our party members then? We'll host a small auction while we recover. We can also trade for more useful items from the first boss too, he suggested as everyone nodded their heads in agreement. Some of them were quite displeased about their items since it didn't suit them at all. If they could trade it for something that can help them, they'll gladly take the chance. Sure. Shiro nodded as she was quite interested in the items that other people have got. As we are all privileged adventurers, I'm sure that money isn't a problem, so we'll trade item for item. How's that? We'll still have the auction format, but instead, we'll call out the information regarding out items, Isaac asked, turning to the other party members. After setting up the details, they put up camp and prepared to have a mini auction. Sitting near the back, Shiro kept an eye out for the monster while also focusing on the auction for any items that were worth obtaining. Most of the things that people sold were just duplicate set items or materials for blacksmiths. During this, she found out that the first boss had dropped a set piece as well. It was just that she got unlucky and didn't get it. However, compared to the second boss, the set effect wasn't as good, so Shiro wasn't too bothered. In the end, she traded for a piece of the World Eater set armor using one of the better individual pieces that she received. Storing the two away, she planned to give it to one of the girls. Maybe this will be helpful for Sylvia since she's a healer. Guardians will protect her better, and the root skill will help her make some distance between her enemies. Shiro thought to herself. Since it was getting dark, they decided to sleep first. Arranging a few people to keep a watch overnight, the party members slept peacefully. However, Shiro and her two daughters stayed awake. Mom, if we were to kill this intelligent monster, do you think the raid will end? Ian whispered. Perhaps. Since he controls this raid, I suppose he is the last boss. And since he's intelligent, leaving the final room wouldn't be surprising. Shiro nodded. What happens if we were to kill him before the other bosses then? Lysandra asked. The raid will probably force us outside, and we'll lose the chance at the first kill rewards. Shiro replied. That's a pity then, isn't it? Lysandra frowned slightly. Nodding her head, Shiro agreed with her statement. But in the end, if the monster was to court death, she would kill it without hesitation. Just as she was about to sleep, she felt a dense amount of killing intent sweep over the tent. Don't move just yet, Shiro whispered as she grabbed both Ian and Lysandra, who were about to get up. If we were to leave the tent quickly, it'll mean our senses are sharp. We don't want that. Wait a while so the other members will be the focus, she explained. After waiting for a short while, they left the tent and saw that most people were dressed and ready for combat. Situation? Shiro asked. One of the monsters wanted to ambush us, but we've killed it. It must be a variant. Isaac frowned as he pointed the dead monster corpse. However, Shiro knew that this was just a disposable pawn as she could still feel the intelligent monster's calculating gaze on their camp. I see, that's good then. Shiro sighed in relief. She had to act a little to convince the monster. ####. It seems like my instincts were wrong. If she was really a danger, she wouldn't have reacted so late to my killing intent. Adventurers can't control their instinctive reactions to danger after all, he thought as he struck Shiro off his list of potential dangers. What he didn't know was that his killing intent wasn't enough to invoke this instinctual movement. Her mind had been tempered by far worse. I'll make my move after the fourth boss. Since they haven't killed it yet, It means that they know nothing about the fifth boss. They will be focusing too much on the boss and expose themselves to me. I only have to wait a few more days, then I can have a few more playmates. Hee, that Alaris seems quite fine. He smiled crudely. Sweeping his gaze over Shiro's group once more, he couldn't help but wonder what they looked like. It was a shame that their face was covered, since he wanted to see what kind of face they had. Their disposition belonged to those that were highly confident. I'll find out later anyway. The more confident they are, the more joy I get. ####. Suppressing her killing intent, Shiro frowned as she had the urge to throw up. The F** curs the R** pay kind, huh? I'll make sure to give him some special treatment. She furrowed her brows. She could clearly feel the lecherous intent in his gaze. For this kind of person, piercing the rear was only a starting act. Making their way through the forest once more, Shiro couldn't help but notice the clear decrease in monsters around the area. Perhaps it's due to the boss? She wondered to herself, but wasn't too bothered. As they approached what seemed to be the spot for the third boss, they saw a giant cavity in the ground with what seemed to be a staircase. Seems like we've got the right place, Isaac said as his voice was serious. From what they've learned from all the intel, once they take the staircase down, they'll be greeted with a wall of eyes. The eyes will be closed, and one would need to shoot the eyes that open and force them to close. However, the most dangerous part of this boss was that it would take a percentage of health rather than health points. This meant that they couldn't rely on tanks to forcefully clear this stage. Miss Nitri, it's up to you now. Isaac turned to Shiro and gestured for her to go down the stairs. MN. Nodding her head, Shiro walked down the stairs calmly. Once they reached the bottom, the stone wall full of eyes greeted them from the opposite side. Flexing her fingers, light and lightning converged at her fingers. This caused some of the party members to tilt their heads in confusion, since she had never done this in the practices. She had always just launched her swords and hadn't used magic like she did now. *PCH. One of the eyes snapped open as the pupil started to glow with an ominous red. *Bang. Firing a small needle of energy towards the eye, Shiro pierced it with ease. *PCH. As the first eye was destroyed, several more opened up and glared towards her in anger. Mages, help me cover the left and right side, and I'll focus on the middle, Shiro said while glancing back at the party. Understood. Two mages replied instantly. They didn't know why, but the moment she made eye contact with them, they suddenly felt like were staring at a monster that could kill them in a single hit. Quickly standing beside her, they created a few orbs that would fire elemental spears at the eyes. While the three of them continued to shoot at the boss, the tankers stood by the side, ready to take a hit just in case. Even though the damage the boss did was percentage-based, they would rather take the hit since the mages might miss a target in the moment where they were recovering. As time passed, the number of eyes that opened started to increase. Not only that, but the surface area of the boss spread to the other walls like an infection. When they reached the 15-minute mark, most of the walls were covered with eyes, and they needed to get all the mages to help out. For those that weren't proficient in accuracy, they had to sit aside or else they would make more trouble rather than help relieve it. We're almost at the final wave. Keep it up, Isaac shouted out while he also helped out with hitting the eyes. On the guide, it said that the last wave was one when each eye would only need a second to charge up their attacks. With the entire wall as a target that they needed to hit, it required everyone to pull their weight. *PCHI. Fire. As the final batch of eyes opened all over the walls, countless skills shot out and pierced the eyes. Naturally, there were some that missed, but they gritted their teeth and endured the pain. *KE. An ear-rupturing screech rang out as the eyes started to dry out and crumble to dust. Phew. We've done. Get down. Isaac shouted out as he flared his aura. Quickly raising his sword, he slashed upwards. *Bang. An explosion rang out as everyone was pushed back. Arg. The force of the explosion had even slammed a few members into the wall as they fractured their ribs. Flipping her body in midair, Shiro frowned and looked towards what Isaac had attacked. Ancient Chimera, LVL 60 boss. HP, 79, 500, 000/80, 000/000. MP, 100,000, 00/100, 000/000. The fourth boss. Why is it here so soon? Shouldn't we need to go past a maze first? She muttered in confusion. Those whose health is above 60% come help me occupy the boss. Healers, get everyone else to at least 50% health. Make sure your return stones are ready. Don't die a pointless death. Isaac shouted out. Checking up on Ian and Lysandra to make sure that they were fine, Shiro looked around the arena and saw that most of the members had decided to give up on this run. Their hands were clenched around the return stone, ready to leave at any moment. TCH, cowards. There'll be no use to the run now that their spirit has given up. Shiro frowned. You too, you can show off a little, but make sure that you save some trump cards. The monster may very well attack at any moment during this raid. She whispered before summoning Ataraxia. Got it. Both Ian and Lysandra nodded their heads seriously as they prepared themselves. Lysandra summoned her weapon while Ian had 3 orbs of dark star element floating around her. Now that they had a better look at the boss, they couldn't help but frown a little. Shaped like a furry T-Rex, but with 3 pairs of arms and 3 tails, the monster could cause lots of collateral damage by just moving around. Plus, they were in a small area right now, so it made the situation even more dangerous for the party. Ian, keep the tails busy. Use your dark star to restrain them. Lisa, make wounds around the shoulder joints for all 6 arms. With your mobility, I believe that you'll make it out of there relatively unharmed. No problem. Of course. Jumping up into the air, Ian changed the orbs into whips. Lashing them towards the tails, she left scorch marks on the fur but failed to burn further, much to their surprise. As for Lysandra, she activated her mana cloak and exploded a small pocket of mana under her foot to give herself some extra lift. Summoning a second sword so that she could dual wield, she plunged them both into the shoulder blades and attempted to pry them up. Yura. Thrashing his body around, the boss tried to shake Lysandra off. However, its rampage was soon cut short as Shiro flickered in front of its eyes. Twitching her body, she slashed Ataraxia horizontally, but had failed in removing the boss's eye due to it closing its eyes in time. *URH. Crying out in rage, a pulse of mana erupted out from its body as it raised all 6 of its arms. Muscles bulged while mana covered at the fists. Earthquake-type skill. Everyone watch out, Shiro shouted out. But just as she looked back at the party, she saw that most of them had crushed the return stone. TCH, F***CK. She clicked her tongue. While she did expect this from them, it didn't make the situation any less frustrating. Good news was that 2 tankers, a healer, Alara and Isaac, had decided to stay for now. Pinging her fingers together, she created a tiny shield that had the skill of absorption and threw it towards the tankers and healers. The shield was disguised as a talisman so that they wouldn't be suspicious. As for the skill itself, it would absorb damage at the cost of durability. This was a skill that she had recycled from a rather low-level shield, as the damage taken per point of durability was percentage-based rather than point-based. This was because the skill wouldn't work against a monster that was 5 levels higher than the equipment. But since her Snowmancer class allowed her to recycle skills, this was especially helpful for her, because she could bypass this flaw by applying this skill to a high-level piece of equipment. Not only that, but she could constantly repair the shield's durability since she had installed a mana coil on the edges of the talisman. This would have the item actively gather mana to repair itself, and thus balancing out the drain of the skill. Of course, there was still an upper limit to the damage threshold, but it wasn't too much of a worry. Bang. As the boss slammed its fists into the ground, the entire arena started to collapse. TCH. Clicking her tongue, Shiro activated her flight skill and dashed towards the other party members. While the shield could absorb damage, it couldn't stop the environment from collapsing. Boom. Unbeknown to them, underneath the arena was a giant cavern that was dimly lit by soft blue rocks. Landing safely with both tankers and the healer, Shiro looked up to see Lysandra holding Alara while Ian was No wait, she just let go of Isaac, and he was now falling head first. Quickly adjusting himself in mid-air, Isaac managed to land without harm. TCH. Ian, Shiro and Lysandra clicked their tongues at the same time. However, just as she was about to back up, Shiro heard a low growl behind her. Turning around slowly, she saw the monstrous being that could be the 5th boss. Demonic Hellhound, LVL 60 boss. HP 100 000 000 100 000 000. MP 100 000 000 100 000 000. For F asterisk CK's sake. She couldn't help but mutter. The Hellhound was entirely made from scrap metal and spiked chains. Neon red lines ran across its body as its three heads glared at her. Quickly grabbing the two tankers and the healer, Shiro dashed out of the way. We know nothing about the fifth boss. We can't fight both bosses at once. Shiro shouted out towards Isaac and Alara. You three get out of here quickly, she said while turning to the people in her grasp. Hastily nodding their heads, they crushed the returned stone and were teleported out of the raid. Setting its gaze on Shiro's back, the Hellhound snarled for a second before tilting its head back. *URH. Howling loudly, a red mist enveloped the area as the temperature rose sharply. Looking at the mist, Shiro furrowed her brows as her instincts warned her of danger. Kish kish. Flexing its entire body, sparks flickered off the Hellhound's body and into the mist. *T. Shiro widened her eyes and quickly slammed her palms into the ground. A pulse of mana exploded out as it pushed the mist aside. However, it wasn't enough. She did consider entering the rift, but the intelligent monster's gaze locked onto her. Troublesome. Shiro gritted her teeth and created a set of armor under her clothes. Injecting as many defensive skills as she could, she braced herself for impact. Boom. Crack. Her body was flung against the wall as coughed up a mouthful of blood. SSSS. Taking a sharp breath in, she glanced at her HP and saw that she was down to 45% health despite using all of her defensive skills. Mummed, Een called out as she glared at the Hellhound with her eyes full of anger. However, Shiro shook her head at Een and made a small hand signal. Suppressing her anger, Een could only nod. Isaac, Alara, get out of here first, Shiro called out. Nodding their heads, they made some distance with the fourth boss and crushed their stones. The only reason that they didn't use it earlier was to reduce some of the pressure on Shiro's group of three. And Spadios. Regrouping with Een and Lysandra, Shiro took off her mask and mouthed a few words before they pretended to try to destroy their stones. However, acting as if the stones failed, all three of them panicked for a short moment before looking up at the hole where they fell down from. You two grab onto me, Shiro said as she tightened her grip around her sword. But before she could do anything, both bosses roared out and charged towards them. *URH. Quickly stabbing her sword into the side of the wall, she launched herself up into the air and activated flight. Dodging some of their attacks, Shiro kept her mind focused on the intelligent monster. She could clearly feel his excitement rise as she purposefully let one of the attacks hit her, burning off her cloak and revealing her face. Twisting her body, she threw Lysandra and Een up the sinkhole and onto the surface. Come on, Shiro cried out as she gritted her teeth. Beckoning Ataraxia into her hands, Shiro slashed apart the boss's attacks and used the force to propel herself upwards. We have to get out of here before the bosses chases us. We'll need to backtrack a little since the stones don't work, Shiro said quickly. Why though? Didn't the stone work for others? Een asked in worry. I don't know. Let's just get out of here first. Shiro shook her head and Lysandra nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, hidden in the trees, the monster's grin widened as he watched on. Holy F***CK? I didn't expect the hooded girl to be a beauty. Hee, I've hit the jackpot this time, he thought to himself as he followed closely behind them. Unknown to him, Shiro had a grin on her face as well. Just keep following, she thought to herself. When they arrived at one of their old campsites, they stopped for a moment and looked around. Phew, I don't think the bosses are following, Shiro sighed in relief. Just as she was about to continue, she felt a presence behind her. Took you long enough, Shiro chuckled as this surprised the monster. Flexing her fingers, nanotech wires enveloped the entire area and wrapped around him. Een created a few dark star spears and aimed it at his face, while Lysandra pinned him down with both her swords. Gah! He cried out as he tried to struggle. However, the tensile strength of the nanotech wires were much bigger than he had thought. One moment of carelessness robbed him of all the advantages that he owned. So then, are we going to talk about what you've been doing then, Mr. Reincarnated Individual? Shiro narrowed her eyes as several Tier 3 magic circles appeared around them, ready to be activated at any time. Looking down at the monster, she saw that it was a humanoid insectoid that had dark purple chitin around his body. Camner LVL-62, Flash Step Assassin. Widening his eyes, Camner didn't believe what he had just heard. What do you mean? He gritted his teeth as he tried to struggle some more. Don't play dumb, Shiro said coldly. Flicking her fingers, the wires around his legs lit up with a mix of dark star and shadow element. Feeling the wire eat away at his flesh, he held back his urge to scream. A dark red aura burst out of him as his body cracked apart and turned to dust. TCH. Clicking her tongue, Shiro instantly activated her ice element shift and celestial armament along with celestial ice wheels. A pair of celestial ice wheel materialized under her feet as her hair shifted to that of a baby blue. However, she wasn't done. Since her opponent was reincarnated just like her, she wasn't going to take it easy on him. Activating her sword skills, ataraxia, and sword domain, her mind instantly locked onto Camner. Currently, he was trying his best to run away. Smiling lightly, Shiro flickered into the rift. Hashtag. SH*T. 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 Camner cried out in his mind as he couldn't believe that she was actually so strong. Not only that, he was forced to use one of his life-saving skills to get out of there since he knew that he would be dead if he stayed. Just as he was about to step on a branch, the rift opened in front of him as Shiro appeared. It wasn't easy catching up to you, you know? Now freeze. She smiled. *KRRR. Icy mist erupted out with her in the center and froze everything within a 10-meter radius. The leaves that were frozen shattered into dust as Camner crashed against the ground. I know that you're reincarnated since there's no way that a monster can have so much experience behind a pair of eyes. Now tell me, which world are you from? Shiro chuckled as stabbed him through the back. Digging her hand into the wound, she grabbed hold of what seemed to be his spine and crushed it in half. Flexing her fingers, a spear appeared behind his rear as Shiro pierced it cleanly into his body. Arg! Ignoring his cries, she grabbed the spear from inside his body and stabbed it through the center of his spine. Propping him up so that the spear held him like a hand puppet, Shiro walked in front of him and smiled. Shall we talk now? Making some more nanotech wires, she made sure the ice prison was quite secure before healing his spine with her fire. The spine healed around the spear, causing Camner to writhe in pain. What do you want to know? He squeezed out barely. Which world are you from, and do you know why you reincarnated? I came from the world of Arya. I don't know, but before I woke up in this body, I was killed due to a person I've always hated for a long time. He said slowly. You're from Arya? Shiro raised an eyebrow. Indeed. Wait a minute. Your name is... Oh my god. He widened his eyes in fear as he realized who Shiro was. Ga? Arg? No. He cried out as his mind seemed to go into shock. From his memories, the name Nitri was always taboo and should never be spoken of. As the most powerful user of the godlike class, Snowmancer, she could make you live a life worse than death. Hell, she might not even let you die as she could turn you into a human-machine hybrid that would automatically torture you while keeping you alive. There had been videos and records hidden deep in the archives where he passed them by chance. Just the thought of those videos made his body shiver in fear. Arg. God. He struggled wildly to no avail. He even welcomed the internal bleeding that came with the spear in his spine since it meant that he could die faster. However, Shiro only clicked her fingers and healed him with the life fire. Seems like you know of me? In that case, you know that you won't die that easily in my hands. She grinned. While Shiro was torturing her captive for more information regarding his reincarnation, the party was getting worried as they waited outside. Why hasn't she come out yet? Isaac said with a frown. Do you think that she might not be able to come out? She is currently fighting against 2 bosses, the 4th boss being one that we haven't been able to kill, and the completely unknown 5th boss. Alara replied as she too was worried about her safety. While she wasn't close to Nitri by any means, it didn't mean that she wanted her to die. Maybe it's because her return stone was faulty. Locke sneered. Shut the F***ck up before I cut you apart. Isaac glared at Locks while his silver aura flared. Huh, do you want to fight me now? You think my family is scared of you? Locks frowned as he held out a talisman. Seeing this talisman, Isaac narrowed his eyes since he recognized it to be an item that boosts up one's power. In the time that he's powered up, he could easily call for his family to back him up. Even if Isaac had his sword domain, he couldn't fight against elders that were in their level 70s. He wasn't like Shiro who could bridge such a wide gap. Taking a deep breath to calm his rage slightly, he started to think about what he could do to help Shiro. Why did the fourth boss appear so early though? Didn't the intel say that the fourth boss only appears after you pass the maze? The healer asked anxiously. As a commotion rang out, Kier soon arrived with his escorts. What happened? He asked with a serious face. We were ambushed by the fourth boss and forced into the lair of the fifth boss. Everyone managed to get out with their return stones, but Nitri, Lisa, and Inya are still stuck in there. Isaac replied. What? That's a concern. Out of everyone here, there was no doubt that Miss Nitri was one of the best adventurers we've seen. She was indispensable for the fourth boss since she could take care of the mobs and targets all by herself. Kier furrowed his brows. We'll set up a small camp here for now, and we'll discuss what we've found out, he said as his escorts got to work. ####. So that's it, huh? Rather curious. It seems that a lot of things have changed in Arya after I died. Shiro leaned back on her ice chair and frowned. Apparently, after she died, the light hero had leveled up quite far into the ranks of Tier 6 where no one could touch him. Using this power, he called for a worldwide abandonment of anything that was related to nanotech. Not only that, he halted the progression of technology and stopped humanity from advancing further, all because of his fear that someone like her would show up once more. Creating anything new became taboo, and people were stuck with the things they had. Freedom was robbed as everything was monitored. If anyone was caught experimenting or trying to develop new classes and technology, they would be tortured alive and made an example of those he claimed to be heretics. Naturally, the hero still wanted a power similar to what Shiro had in her past life, so he continued a private research group that conducted experiments on children who had just awakened their class. This experiment was to see if they were able to gain a second class. Rumors would float around regarding this private lab, but no one could do anything about it since the hero was too powerful. Secretly, groups of people banded together to form a cult of sorts that worshipped Nitri Vespera as the machine goddess. Dubbed the Vespera faction, they would search the world for links to their goddess and use that to fight against the Light faction. No one knew each other in the Vespera faction to avoid the government from knowing their identities. Most of the ordinary people and those who were oppressed during the Light Hero's rule was in this faction. Believing that once they've secured a supposed legacy to fight against the Light Hero, they created a secret network that would allow them to communicate and research the classes with one another. While some people were killed, the faction lived on as the hero ruled like a tyrant. Fear grew in the hero's heart as he started to make EXP packs. These weren't items of any sort. No, they were people who he cultivated from the ground up, and once they reached the limit of Tier 5 or the start of Tier 6, their fate would only be death at the hero's hands. Not only that, if death was certain, the hero would detonate the bomb that he implanted in them to make sure that he still received the EXP. This action caused fear to grow in the hearts of the people as the Vespera faction was enraged by his act. Unlike his secret lab where he researched about the second class, this was done in broad daylight. It was an honor to be part of the hero's power, they said, using it as an excuse to kidnap people from the streets. Since he was invincible in the world, he may as well drop all formalities and do whatever he wanted. At this point, even criminals like Kamner did their best to revolt against the hero. Before his death, Kamner was tasked with assassinating one of the higher-ups in the hero's government and stealing their documents regarding the second class. While one would be suspicious of the mission, since it could be a trap, the Vespera faction had a system to filter the missions out. Each mission they gave out were put through a series of tests and confirmations to validate the authenticity of said mission. But despite all of this, missions had their own risks. It was unfortunate that he had ran into the Light Hero's royal guards and was killed brutally with his body in pieces. Even if he was a talented assassin, the difference in tiers and equipment was nothing to laugh about. When he woke up, he was inside a dungeon with a bug body. Desperately killing monsters and leveling up, he worked his way back up to his stage now. Every time he killed the final boss in the dungeon and tried to leave with the teleport shrine, he would be randomly placed in a different dungeon. But this time, he was placed in a raid as the final boss. In his attempt to leave the dungeon for good, he ran into Shiro and was placed in this awkward position. That B asterisk starred had really F asterisk kept up the world, huh? Last time I heard about him, he had already become a tier 8 god. Shiro clicked her tongue. Wait, what? Tier 8 god? I thought there were only 7 tiers. Kamner tilted his head in confusion. Ironically, having the spear embedded in his body for the entire time of his explanation had allowed him to adapt to the pain. Now it just felt like an out-of-place bone. So did I? But when I ran into the bastard's daughter, who was dubbed the Light Goddess, she told me that he had already become a god. Time is quite strange. When I reincarnated, he had just killed me and was in the start of tier 6. In the quest, he was a tier 8 god, and when you died, he was in the higher ranks of tier 6. Shiro placed her hand on her chin and closed her eyes. Say, Your Highness, I know that I deserve to die, but can you spare me? As a reincarnator, I can't say I'm as experienced as you, but I'm better than some random level 60 you can find, right? If we work together, I'm sure we can level up quickly. Kamner asked as he held on to a tiny sliver of hope. Nope, I don't work with our asterisk pay B asterisk stars like you. Shiro shook her head firmly. It didn't matter how good they were, but if they were to break her bottom line, she wouldn't want anything to do with them. I expected as much. Can you at least make my death quick? He pleaded, accepting his fate of death. Who knows, he might get another chance in a world where he doesn't run into Shiro. I can, but you must tell me everything there is to know about the bosses. This queen wants some equipment. Shiro grinned. The 4th boss is just a mix of the previous 3 bosses that you've encountered. Depending on the amount of damage you deal, there will be 3 wipeout phases where you need to damage his armor, minions, and targets. Kamner explained as he tried to adjust his posture. Having a spear up in one's ass and spine isn't exactly the most comfortable even if he got used to the sensation. Anything else I need to worry about? Berserk skills and such? Shiro asked. Nope. The boss is rather simple if you consider the number of skills it has. An earthquake skill, an area of effect, and a single target spell. Most of the time, it just relies on physical prowess. Kamner shook his head. Okay then, what about the 5th boss, the Hellhound? He's a bit of a pain in the ass. Defenses are extraordinary, and every move he makes will spark the explosive dust clouds that he produces. Rather than a skill, it's more of an active effect where explosive dust clouds are formed with every movement. As for skills, he has a root skill that takes a while to activate and a party wipe skill that floods the entire area in explosive clouds. Unless you can counter this, he will basically deal damage to you at every moment. Any berserk skills? There is one. His berserk skill has all of his mechanical parts float around him as weapons connected to spiked chains, while his main body shifts between levels of tangibility constantly. It's a pain to hit him while he can attack you rapidly. Not only that, he gains a boost in his speed and attack. Kamner replied cooperatively. How long does it last for? Around 4 to 5 minutes, give or take. Kamner shrugged his shoulders. Why are you not sure? Shiro narrowed her eyes at his response. Because I can't control the 5th boss. I can control 1 through 4, hence why the 4th boss appeared sooner than expected, but the 5th boss is completely out of my control, so I can't see all of its skills in detail. Some of them are hidden. Kamner explained. Troublesome. Oh well, I think I can deal with the last 2 bosses. What do you think, girls? Shiro asked as she turned to her daughters. I think we can do it. Just the 4th boss might be hard because of the party wipe skill. Lysandra smiled lightly. Let's do it. That way, we can get better loot. Ian nodded. However, inside, she was gambling on the fact that Shiro will treat them to a better meal if they succeed. In that case, then let's go. Kamner, you'll be staying alive until we've killed both boss. Wait a minute. If you can control the 4th boss, can't you just have it stay still and let us kill him? Shiro paused as she realized an easy opportunity. No, I can't do that. The most I can do is choose where it goes. Combat-wise, it's up to you. Kamner shook his head. TCH, fine, just have him move to an open area so that I can have an easier time killing him. Shiro said as she stood up. Auric, wait, why are you coming closer to me? Kamner smiled nervously as he saw Shiro circle around him. What would you rather watch with the spear in your ass? Shiro raised an eyebrow. Do you have any anesthetic? He asked as his face paled slightly. Nope. Can you give me a moment to prepare myself then? Sure. I'll do what doctors do and count down from 5, okay? Shiro smiled. Kamner didn't know why, but he became more nervous when he saw that smile. Asterisk gulp. Okay, countdown please. Kamner said as he took a deep breath. 5, 4, 1. Asterisk Poochie. Arg. Where the hell was 3 and 2? Kamner shouted out as Shiro pulled the spear out ruthlessly. You get more nervous and tense up once if I continued normally. If you're unprepared, you're more relaxed. If you're that worried about me, you could have just thought it inside me. Kamner retorted while a waterfall of blood was gushing out his ass. It made even the worst period look tame. Healing him up with life fire, Shiro made sure to add some safety nets inside his body so that she could kill him at any moment. Bring the 4th boss to where we fought the massive F***CK off tree. You should know where that was since you've been watching us for quite a while. Shiro smiled lightly as she started to walk towards the aforementioned area. Kamner nodded obediently. He had no intention of running since he could clearly feel foreign objects moving around in his body. A clear sign that she didn't trust him, but he didn't mind. As long as he wasn't subjected to more torture, he was fine with it. Ian, Lysandra, both of you can go full power now. If you want, you can remove that cloak so your wings have more room to move. Yes. Ian agreed instantly as she threw her cloak away. If not for the fact that she needed to hide her identity, she wouldn't have worn something so annoying to begin with. Spreading her wings, her speed instantly increased. Lysandra did the same. Arriving at the place, Shiro placed her palm onto the ground and focused her mind. Nanobots started to spread out underground as she constructed a few traps to help her slay the 4th boss. I need constructs that restrain, pierce, stun, and maybe even one to make the boss airborne. Shiro thought to herself. As she was making the traps, Kamner was guiding the boss to their location. He's about to arrive, he called out. Nodding her head, Shiro stood up and activated her skills. For this boss, speed and firepower is a must. Celestial lightning armament should do the trick. She thought as lightning crackled around her. Asterisk URH. Just as she finished activating all of her skills, the boss had arrived. We're going to do this nice and systematically, alright girls. Shiro grinned as nanobots swarmed around her body, creating a set of armor over her celestial armament. She combined both skills together as her stats were increased once more. Tapping the magnetic discs around her waist, she created several rail cannons while all 7 copies of Ataraxia floated around her. Hit it with everything you have, she shouted out and fired all of the cannons. Asterisk boom 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 boom. That's not systematic. Kamner shouted out in his mind as this was just spamming all her skills. However, he could understand why the hero was scared of her. For her to be able to create this many life-threatening weapons at once, she had power that could easily kill a level 60 despite only being level 52. He could only lament at the fact that she didn't kill him with those weapons, as this would have reduced the amount of suffering he had experienced. Asterisk URH. Shouting out in rage, the boss tried to glare at Shiro, but the only result was his eyes being stabbed by a sword. Who the hell gave you permission to glare at this queen? Shiro laughed. She was finally able to go full power in this raid after holding back for quite a while. Growling angrily, the boss wrapped his body in armor. Tiny copies of himself spawned around him as he tried to activate the party wipe skill. Since Ian and Lysandra were responsible for the armor, Shiro focused on the minions. A visor dropped down in front of her, marking all of the minions with a red glow. Her weapons hummed slightly as Shiro pulled the trigger. Asterisk boom 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 boom. 10 heavy-duty bullets flew into the air and shattered apart into tiny pieces, which tracked down all of the minions that she marked with the red glow. Asterisk bang. Each fragment was able to tear a hole through the minion's body with ease as small craters were formed as collateral, dotting the entire battlefield with tiny craters that emitted a small wisp of some due to the bullets. She had wiped out all of the minions within a few seconds. If any of the party members stayed behind to see her fight, They would think that they're dreaming since this kind of power was inconceivable for any level 52 to wield. No wonder people worshipped her. Camner muttered in admiration. Despite having lost her former prowess, the machine goddess was a figure that one shouldn't provoke regardless of the situation. One can only hope that she either lets you live or finish you off quickly.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.